to get up. And if I fell down again, I was going to get up. And I was going to keep moving till I either hit that camp or I walked off the face of that mountain.
Beck's teammates were certain he was lying dead in the snow, so they were pretty startled when he staggered into the high camp. Beck's life hung by a thread, but Ed was determined to rescue him.
The camera team put down their gear and followed me up the mountain into the storm. We just lost Rob. We sure as hell weren't going to lose Beck, too. He was so blind and so weak that we had to support him and physically place his feet in each step. But even with our help, Beck just didn't have the strength to get through the icefall. His frostbitten hands would have to be amputated, so time was critical. We had to get him out of there soon.
A helicopter rescue at over 20,000 feet seemed out of the question. Up here, the air is so thin that the blades have almost nothing to bite into. At any moment, the aircraft may lose lift and fall out of the sky. The only previous flight up here ended in a crash. But a Nepalese pilot named Colonel Madan KC decided to risk it. Even when the helicopter flew up above the icefall, Beck's survival was still very much in doubt.
The pilot had trouble setting down. No one knew if they would crash.
After the climbers loaded Beck in, the pilot struggled to lift off. Finally, he did.
As we flew away, the tears began to flow, and I was just so grateful to be alive. Colonel Madan, Ed, Beasters, the guys on the film crew, I literally owed him my life.
Well, quite a few years later on the National Geographic expedition, we ended up with some beautiful weather. We were back up there at 8,000 meters on the South Col, and at 11 o'clock at night, in brutally cold conditions, we headed out across the Col, up the freezing gullies, onto an area called the Balcony on the southeast ridge, and eventually up onto the south summit of Mount Everest itself, where 59 years ago, of course, my father and Tenzing had reached before they looked up this incredible summit ridge to the top of the mountain. And it's a very scary ridge. You imagine a bread knife, this serrated line of cornices and steep rock. And they had to climb along that where no one had ever gone before. They really did go into the unknown. And the Hillary step, which Dad made the first ascent of, is a 40-foot, 12-meter near vertical rock and ice step. And they wriggled their way and hauled themselves up that, and then eventually, of course, onto the summit of the mountain. And it was very exciting for me to be back up there. It was my second time on the summit. I must admit I was thinking about their endeavors so many years before, but also the first time I'd been there. But you've got to remember, we were on a National Geographic filming expedition. We had work to do. We actually had written down on a piece of paper, you know, the various photographs we were supposed to take. We had to get shots of Dawa Sherpa with an ice axe with flags on it, just as my father had photographed Tenzing. We had to also make phone calls. You know, that's one of those things we have to deal with these days in this modern world. I had an Iridium satellite telephone, and, you know, I called my father at home and spoke to him. But National Geographic wanted Pete Athens to film me having an interview with CNN News. And apparently, in Atlanta, the CNN journalist was fully briefed. I had a special telephone number written down, and he was just waiting for my call. So I plugged the number into the phone. Now, you've got to write these telephone numbers down, because at that elevation, 8.8 kilometers in the air, you can't even remember your own telephone number, let alone anyone else's. So I rang this number and, you know, held the phone up to my ear, and I could hear it ringing, and someone goes, CNN News. I said, it's Peter Hillary calling from the summit of Mount Everest. He said, who? I mean, what do you have to do these days to get anyone to take your call? So I went on to say, you know, look, we can't hold any longer. You know, we've got to do this call now. It's very, very cold. And he went on and said, look, really, the timing for your call is not that good. You know, we've got a lot of news coming in from Pakistan and other places, remember from the Afghan war and so on. But eventually, I handed the phone over to Brent Bishop, and he took the rest of the call. Oh, Pete Athens is filming away in Kami. And then we got on with the really critical part on any big climb, and that is getting yourself safely back down to the bottom of the mountain. And I want to show you now some footage of being up there and that whole National Geographic climbing expedition experience.
5 hours out from the South Col, before dawn on Everest. The bitter cold wreaks havoc with the camera. But as the sun finally hits the climbers, the camera, shot by Pete Athens, warms up and records a steady image.
Moving at extreme altitude, it's a study in timeless motion. People take 2, 3, 4 steps, and then they stop and they lean on their ice axe and they're just hyperventilating, dragging air through that regulator from the oxygen bottle.
It's a scary ridge. It's exposed. There are a lot of places where if you make a mistake, you're going to die.
Half a century ago, Tenzing and Hillary reached the top of the Hillary Step, and only 100 vertical feet stood between them and history.
There is no such thing as reaching the summit first or second. Hillary and Tenzing climbed it for passion and for exploration, not for competition. And I think my father's bottom line was it doesn't matter who climbed up there first. They both relied on each other to get up there. If one was not there, the other one wouldn't be there.
My father has never said anything different to me other than that we were a team. We were tied together on a rope. At times, Tenzing had to hold me to prevent me from falling, and similarly, it was my duty to secure him and look after him. We climbed it together.
Base camp, base camp. This is Everest summit, over.
Congratulations on getting to the top.
Thank you, Jomling. Everybody is here. Everybody is safe. Dad?
Hello, are you there, Peter?
Dad, it's Peter here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
Oh, good. Well, we're on the summit of Everest. We've been here for 40 minutes.
It's cloudy all around, but we're on top of it all. It's an amazing outlook, Dad. Yeah, how was the Hillary Step? Look, I've got to say,
Not only the Hillary Step, but the climb up onto the South Summit. It's really steep and really exposed, and
I feel really emotional about being up here because you guys...
what you did, well, nearly 50 years ago, it's just incredible. I mean, we had fixed ropes all the way. You guys cut steps basically into the unknown.
You know, our family's relation with Rolex started in 1952. When my father was part of the member of the Swiss Everest expedition in 1952, they had made 2 attempts, one in the spring and one in the fall. And in the spring, he had gone with his climbing partner, Raymond Lambert, and they had got almost about 400 meters from the summit and had to turn back. In 1953, when he went back up with the British expedition, he had the same watch that he took as luck, for his luck, and he basically went to the top with that watch. And ever since then, you know, our family has been associated with Rolex, and Peter's family too. And I remember one of the important things my father told me, you know, was that when you're climbing high on mountains, you always keep an eye on time, you know. And time, the reason to keep an eye on time was because the higher you go, there's almost 1/3 of the oxygen high up there at about 8,000 feet, 8,000 meters. And the important thing he said was, you always look at your watch every 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Just keep looking at your watch to make sure that you have,